Good morning. My name is Dan Ficker, and this is my presentation on how to handle on your website handle secure data. I'll just get this out of the way. First of all, this is me. I'm Dan. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. Do mostly back-end web development. Currently, I'm working at Pantheon as a support engineer. So, if you have lots of Pantheon questions about websites hosted on Pantheon, you might get me or one of my teammates. And then, I've been doing Drupal for almost 20 years now. Had fun playing around in GeoCities back in the late 90s to first be like, I could make a website. So that's a little bit about me. And then, let's see. I hit the wrong button, but okay. This is the next slide here. It's just kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about. What is security? Do I have to worry about security? And how kind of the websites and the internet works as far as a security thing, and some info on how to protect your website. So let's just get started. So this is kind of my thought on what is security. Basically, like some pages on on the website on your website are public, but other things on your website are private. And security is basically making sure that the private things stay private. Only gives out the private data to the correct users and that type of thing. If your website is secure, then your data that is not public is not being accessed by other people, malicious, unwanted visitors and stuff like that. So here's a question just thrown out: is security easy? And the answers are yes and no, a little bit. Security is built into modern web servers, browsers, and Drupal. I remember 10 or 15 years ago, it was kind of like every website was insecure unless it was secure, and now it's more like every website you communicate with is pretty much secure unless it's really old, and then it might not be secure. But it's definitely changed over the years. But these days, the good news is, for the most part, your website is transferring data between the website and your browser fairly securely, except for rare cases. The other thing that's great is, many best practices and open source solutions, libraries are available to help you make your website secure. Drupal itself is fairly secure just out of the box. And, the other side of that, though, too, is security might not be as easy just because basically new issues are found all the time. You could say, my website's secure today as far as I know, but then find out, actually something's been there for years and we just only found out about it, and maybe people are using it already or not to kind of take advantage of a security vulnerability in your website. But also, when you write some custom code, you want to really think about security at least to some extent, and it can be hard to do that sometimes. But yes, I think in general you should be concerned about the security of your website and try to make your website as secure as possible. But I'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But first I'm going to go over some just basic concepts of how security on the internet works. And there's a few different ways that security happens. This one's called public key encryption. So basically, this is kind of how almost all website communication works, and other things. And basically, you have two different keys. They're usually, I think, pretty long random numbers that kind of work together or something. And basically, if you encrypt something with one, you decrypt the information with the other. And only that, if you have both keys together, can you actually do that. And I'll go through that a little bit here. But so you get a private key and a public key. The idea is the private key never leaves your server. It's private, and if it stays private, then the security works. If it's not private, then it doesn't work. But then you can give out the public key to anyone, and they can encrypt or decrypt information that is made with that public key. So it's kind of a two-way system, and I have a little graph or a diagram here. Basically, the internet by default is just kind of unencrypted data to some extent, or at least that's how it was designed originally. So if you just had unencrypted data working across there, it just wouldn't be that secure. because basically, in the old days, if you were on the Wi-Fi here, you could just be looking at the Wi-Fi and say, hey, what is everyone else visiting, and what kind of data are they downloading and uploading? And it's not great for privacy, security, and that type of thing. But what we've improved things with is now you have this encryption algorithm, the public and private key things, and so the data actually goes through the public key to get encrypted, and then it looks like random data going across the internet that is just meaningless. Anyone looks at it and just says, "Well, I don't know what that is. It's something that I can't read and I can't understand." But the person that has the public key at the other end, if it is encrypted with if it has the private key, they can decrypt it or encrypt also data to go back to the same person. And so this is really great because you can basically say, hey, I want to send and receive information, and only the person that I've meant to communicate this with can actually get and receive this information. And that's, thankfully, that's how most of websites work these days. If it's HTTPS in the browser bar, it's basically doing all this for you. So that's what I just said. HTTPS uses this TLS encryption. TLS 1.2 or 1.3 is the standards that most people want to use now. But the web server, has a private key that's never going to leave the web server, hopefully. If the web server does lose their private key and someone else has it, then anyone else could impersonate that server. But when your device connects to the server gives you the public key, and then you can kind of send information back and forth between the two of you. And this is, like I said, that's how almost every website works, and how data is sent between all the apps on your phone and that type of thing, and their servers and stuff like that. It's also the same type of thing is used for SSH keys. So your local SSH client has a private key that you keep on your local machine, but you give out the public key that says, hey, if you ever see a private key, or if you ever see this public key, that means it's me. And the bonus thing is that basically it proves that you're you, but it also you can just say, hey, I'll accept that, and I don't even need a password because it's pretty secure. You have to basically have that private key in order to actually log in as that person. So it's a really easy way to kind of connect via SSH. Let's see. And another way we do encryption is this one-way encryption called hashing. And so basically, it does a bunch of, I'm just going to do this type of thing in both of these cases, just a bunch of fancy math of some sort. I don't know, it's complicated. But basically, it just takes a piece of text like password 1, which is a bad password to never use. But basically, it encrypts it, and it comes out with this really long string of random-looking hexadecimal characters. And basically, this is the way that actually a lot of password validation systems work. So Drupal basically stores something like this long hash thing, and every time you log in, it does the same hash thing over again, and it says, oh, if you type password 1 and the hash comes out to the same, then that's the password. It's the right password. So this process is generally not reversible. So basically, if you had that hash, you can't figure out exactly what password that is. There's a caveat to that is basically like if you know exactly what process it is, and you can try going from doing the main process again, you could maybe, after a while of guessing, find out what the password is. So there's no way to say, hey, I've got this hash, what's the password? But you could maybe try a bunch of different ones and guess correctly, or at some point, or make an educated guess or something like that. So,
but you need to guess not only the password but also the hash salt.
Right, yeah. So that's a good point, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. Is like you can do some things to make it much harder to guess. So I just typed password 1 and just used the SHA 256 algorithm, I think, to get that. But if you could say, hey, put something really random that's just for this Drupal website and that kind of thing. That's what Drupal does, and we'll look at that a little bit here too. But there's a very small possibility, I guess, that if someone else puts in a different word, that it might come up with a hash, but it's a very, very small possibility, and so it's somewhat negligible. But I suppose it's possible. But yeah, usually if you modify even one character, the whole hash is going to just change like almost completely. So that's kind of, yeah. Sometimes these math things are a little complicated, and I don't know if I fully understand them either. But the good news is that security researchers and some other people, really smart math people, have said, yes, this is secure. But yeah, here we look at actually a little bit of the code. You can see on the right side of, I think, Drupal 10 is maybe where I took this from. But yeah, Drupal does, this is a good important point. Drupal does not store the password in plain text. It just stores a hash, and it stores that in the database at SHA-512 hash. It supports older systems like MD5, just in case you've upgraded from an older version of Drupal that used that. And then you did talk about too. You mentioned that right here it salts the password, so that means it adds some unique random data to each password hash to make it harder to crack it, and it makes it much more complicated. You can't just take the whole database of all the passwords and just keep trying things and find out each one, because each one has a little bit different extra random data that we do store in the database as well. But yeah, another good, just to highlight that again, Drupal does not store your password. There's no way to for someone actually to figure out, if they get a copy of your database, what exactly your password was, except for trying a whole bunch of times. And if they get a copy of the database and have a bunch of computers that say, hey, I want to figure out if I can find what the answer is. But if they have a copy of your website, they can do a lot of other things. So yeah. And then when you log into Drupal again, it basically does that same hashing process again and just compares the output and says, oh, if it matches, then you're in. Let's see. This is about just storing other sensitive data in Drupal. Like Drupal does pretty well with storing your password. Other sensitive data, I would recommend maybe not doing it if you can, just because there is kind of security things. And I'm thinking of social security numbers, credit card numbers, those type of things. In general, I wouldn't recommend storing those in Drupal, just because that makes you more of a target to some extent, and you do have to worry a little bit more about security. And most of the time, especially like credit card information and stuff like that, the banks and other people will be like, hey, please don't store that. Send it out to Stripe or Authorize.net or some other payment service where they will take care of it and securely handle that. And let's see. Yeah, the other thing that's important to remember too is, if you're gonna do some secure storing of data, if you have to, try to use industry standards that other security experts have put together. There are lots of PHP libraries that will do this type of encryption and decryption for you. It's really helpful. You can think, oh, I might be able to figure out how to encrypt this myself. It's very easy for actually someone to find a flaw in that, and you want to, in general, I think, try to use some standards that are already out there that some other people have researched and said, yes, this is actually secure. And yeah, I think another good point too, is I think I'm a web developer, and some of you guys are web developers, I'm sure, and then, hackers definitely think in a different way. I think we just try to write a program that says, do the thing I want to, but hackers are thinking like, how can I use what's already there to do something that they don't want me to do? And it's really hard as a developer to think of how it could be misused like that, and so that's why you can often miss something if you're writing a lot of your own programming and systems for that. Let's see. I think there's one Drupal module called Encrypt that I noticed, and that seems to use some of these standard libraries to kind of encrypt data if you really need to use it. But I think it's also, like I said, something to consider. Like, could you outsource this to another company where they have to handle the data, deal with that data to some extent. And then here's some more. I'm speeding through this, so I think we'll have plenty of time for questions. But let's see. General information about security. in Drupal. Drupal.org/security has a lot of information there about the Drupal security team, as well as just how Drupal is secure. A lot of information there too about different modules and other parts of Drupal that have had security vulnerabilities and what was done to fix those type of things. And also very important to see that shield icon right above all the releases. This screenshot is from a few months ago, or 9 months ago maybe. That's why it's green instead of blue. Apparently the designers of Drupal.org changed the colors a little bit. But if you see that shield icon next to any of the releases, that means that the security team is not, they haven't looked at all the code, but if there are security issues, they can be reported to them, and the security team, I think, will work on making a fix and that type of thing. I'm not a member of the security team, so I don't know all the details on that, but that's my understanding. And those are supposed to be designed by the developers of the module to be very stable or as stable as possible. Trusted releases, they're not a beta or an alpha or something like that. Another thing I see, so as a security kit module, I've seen not a lot of sites use this, that basically tries to help set some various things to make it more secure. I know like some headers that try to secure the web browser a little bit more to say, hey, don't load things from other untrusted websites and that type of thing. And then I think, I was trying to remember, there was, somebody mentioned like there's a security review module, I think, too, that someone's put together that just tries to give you some suggestions on security, too. A great thing for security, too, is to keep your site's core modules and themes up to date, any of the libraries, basically. If there are a new version released, try to update. You could definitely spend every day doing that, because there's lots of updates all the time. So maybe don't update immediately, but maybe every few weeks or every month, try to update the website and just keep things up to date, because usually those are things that will help make your website at least more secure, sometimes also more fast, more stable, that type of thing. I think, let's see. I think that's all the slides I have, but I guess like I said, I ran through them real fast. So we can do a lot of questions, I guess, if people have, and I can definitely talk about more. Anything or any other points people want to make? I did talk about this at Twin Cities Drupal Camp, and I think I took like 30 minutes to go through all these slides, so I don't know. It must have been more chatty, but yes.
Yeah, in the HTTPS protocol, I don't think that every transmission goes through public key encryption.
Okay.
But at the start of the session, public key encryption is used to create a shared secret.
Oh, okay.
And then that secret is used with a faster encryption algorithm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that's good to know. Like I said, I know some of the details, but not everything. And that's good to know. Yeah, but it's still generally secure, right? Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yes.
Real life example. I have a client with 200,000 web form submissions. Some of those have income levels and emails attached to them.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about that. What would your suggestions be in terms of security concerns with that data?
Just for the recording, I guess you were saying you had lots of web form submissions with emails and income levels and that type of thing. That's a lot of important data. I think some of that stuff in general is just make sure that the website is kind of being updated somewhat regularly. If there are security vulnerabilities found, patch that. I think. If you had a better way to store it maybe somewhere else that was offline or something, maybe just download all the results and delete them or something at some point. I think I don't know. There might be some way to because I think by default anybody who can access the database or any admin can access all that data on the site.
It's available to admins. We're not concerned about that. Yeah. But no, I was thinking along the same lines. I don't think it needs to be there. And so I think offloading it to someplace offline is probably the safest.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think I don't think I mentioned, but it's like make sure that those admins are not using password 123 as their password or something. And then there are some ways to do that too. I think there is a password policy module that where you can say, hey, the password has to be this complicated or have these types of things. You could also add some sort of some module that requires a second factor of authentication to your admins and stuff like that. So that would just also be more helpful to make sure that like, hey, nobody can accidentally guess the password or find out what the password is for an admin account and get all that info. But
the attack vectors might actually be outside the production system.
Yeah.
The database dump that you hand over to your dev team
that's true.
outside the production system might be an easier attack target. Like it's easy to bribe people and do some social engineering kind of thing. I mean, like there was the recent attack on Conbase, for example, that just bribed the support people that were overseas and they got access to it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. That's...
We don't have those concerns, but yeah,
You also got to remember too, if you're working like in a dev staging environment, think about developers pulling down production databases. Now you got 200,000 submissions on 4 different developers' devices.
And you lost track of where the data is.
Yeah.
You might also have.
I guess, guys, but
Now we're going to start piling on.
well, I think this raises a more pertinent question about like practicality and yeah, I could do that and I could lock it down a whole lot of other ways, and that would be we don't have. This isn't a serious concern, but it's just as a guy who's admitting the site, I feel like I need to do the right thing here. But what you guys are bringing up raises the point of, geez, if you're really going to work that secure, you're going to have to lock down all sorts of things, and that's going to double your development time.
The things like private information. I mean, all the regulation that's around that. I mean, I'm from France, so from the other side of that ocean, and the regulations are like way bigger, but it's coming.
Yeah,
it's all
that's PII, but I think
In a lot of the ways they handle that, it's like they just encrypt everything by default, and if you need to delete some of the information, you delete the encryption key, and it's effectively deleted. You still have to manage the encryption keys, but you can find third-party services.
If it's exposed to the production environment through environment variables, for example, even if you fetch the database on your local environment or a non-prod environment, the data is just counted up and you can't read it. It's a good security. The other thing is probably more in terms of governance. Is like, do you actually need to have all that data retained in the Drupal? If it gets sent over whatever medium to someone else for treatment, that's maybe where it should reside, and then you can have a cleanup process that wipes everything that's more than 7 days old, and then.
Right. What's the workflow?
You're absolutely you're correct.
What's the workflow for those web form submissions? When do you need that data? And as soon as you don't need it anymore,
It should be gone. Yeah. No. Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
send it to Zoho or send it to wherever it's HubSpot, or you know what I mean, wherever you end up putting it in like a CRM, it might be a better direct solution.
it's the same principle as form design. You don't ask a question that you don't need the answer to.
Yeah.
yeah, I think security is kind of an ongoing conversation, discussion. It's like, you want to, if you lock things down too much, it makes it almost impossible to do any work. Or I mean, the most secure thing or the most secure way is just to not be on the internet to some extent, but that's not really possible, or practical, that type of thing. So, yeah.
Sorry, I have a cautionary tale to share, but it's
Sure.
a change of topic, so if you have more to say.
No, I've got another topic. You go for that one.
Okay, so this was years ago. Mistake number one that I made was using a shared hosting company, HostGator, to host a site. I know that no one here would do that, but maybe you've got a client who would do that. Mistake number two that I made was using field permissions module, so that when I, as a logged in user, viewed a URL of a node, I saw more information than a logged out user would see at the same URL. And what happened was that I had a malfunctioning script somewhere else on the site, not Drupal, something else malfunctioned. And HostGator invoked a clause in their user policy that they would cache the last viewed version of every URL and serve that as static HTML. And so the public or the private versions of my pages were getting served as public. And the way that I found out about this was that my credit card data started showing up because I had some file hidden away somewhere that, in case I get hit by a bus, go to this address, but I thought it was security by obscurity because I was young and stupid. And that file became public because of this clause. And it got searched by Google and showed up, and that's how I found out that my client data was also being displayed. So there was nothing I could do about that because HostGator is untouchable, but I learned a few lessons that day.
You gotta switch to Pantheon.
Could be, yeah.
That's a scary thing.
That's
Yeah, that's a scary thing.
yeah, that's tough.
I guess the other way around that, like if the alternative to field permissions would be to set up an alternate display of the same node, so
yeah.
that your private version of the node is at a different path, a different URL path. And
Right.
then Google wouldn't search that.
Was that in fine print too? That's like something you would never.
I'm sure it was way in the fine print. I never
I
even
bet it
thought
was billed as a service that they provide. We'll have continuous access to all your content. Never be down. 100% uptime.
I'm just curious how they did it, like if it was an Nginx proxy, because they get the last viewed page and file, save it as a file and serve that as a file. That's
Well, they were just
Pretty
plainly disregarding standard HTTP headers about phishing and utility, and that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
open
more
sessions.
modern CDNs probably do that a little bit better, make sure they're not
They would
accidentally exposing private data, but hopefully.
So that was kind of what my comment was gonna be, so that would be like a Cloudflare or a Fastly, or putting some type of layer in between those two services to help. It doesn't take away your HostGator clause, but at least there's like a barrier before that clause gets
Right.
invoked.
No, this was over 10 years ago, so.
Yeah, so that probably didn't even exist, yeah.
So you first need a time machine.
But yeah, that's the way we learn things too. Is sometimes the worst thing happens, and or one of the worst things happens, and you have to
Well, it's a learning
deal
experience.
with it. Yeah. Any more questions, discussion points, anything?
I was going to ask, because you mentioned Second Security Kit, and
Yeah.
it's one of the modules I've been looking at amongst a bunch of others, and even topics that were discussed before, like anonymizing database information when it's on dev environments or encrypting backups.
Mhm.
One of the parts of that kind of worried me, and I didn't know if you've had issues with it, but maybe anyone else here, since we're all interested in security being here, has as the content security policy, like you mentioned, being able to block scripts or things, content from outside sources that you don't want running on your site.
Mhm.
Is there an easy way, or have you had issues where you've accidentally blocked stuff that you did want working that is always running in the background, maybe Google Analytics or other
Yeah.
telemetry stuff?
So-
How do you go about ensuring you don't break the site?
Yeah, a lot of security stuff says, oh, you should set a content security policy header, and I think it's a really good idea because basically it tells the browser like only load images from the current domain, but like or these other domains or images, scripts, and those type of things, and you can kind of customize that. But you're right, if you have to kind of basically audit everything that is loaded on every page of your website, and and put that in the list basically. Or otherwise, stuff will just not load anymore once you add that header. And so I don't know. It can be definitely, how do you find all those things, and when your editors kind of add various things, like do they know that they need to kind of have that changed, or So I think yes, I know as a Pantheon support person, so often companies are like, just come to us and be like, can you set a content security policy thing for us? And I'm like, no, you have to basically go through your whole website and say, where do I want to allow things to come from, to be loaded from on the web, in the browser? And you're right, yeah, Google Analytics, your ad tracking systems, the place where you load your fonts from, or your JavaScript, from a CDN, that type of thing. And so
I even think it might, I don't know if it affects any just scripts or if it affects all things, but I feel like I worry about other API type sources, JSON data from other sites within our organization, but just have different domains.
Yeah, I think, so the content security policy, and I think the SecKit does have an option where you can say, hey, if the browser tries to violate this, actually send me a report about that, so you can actually kind of build up a list of what it is instead of just auditing your whole website, loading every page and looking at what's on there or something.
The security kit has an option for that.
Yeah.
But it can take your website down.
Yeah, I mean, it adds a lot of, every time it makes a report, then it makes another request to your website, and it can make your website slower. So you want to be very careful if you're doing that on a production website. That's true. Yeah.
It's actually two separate headers. One is the content security policy, and the other is content security policy -logging or something.
Okay, yeah.
And it can be really hard if you have an old crufty website that has been pulling stuff in from all over the place for years to design a content security policy.
If you don't know who has access to the Google Tag Manager configuration, and they can add new stuff.
That's true, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what I don't know why that was pushed so hard by Google, because that always seemed like a bad option, a way to inject JavaScript on any page of your site by design.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be helpful to decouple the configuration, but then
Give marketers the tools they need. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the good idea of the content security policy is if somehow someone was able to inject some code into your website, then it just wouldn't load because that header didn't change or something. It makes it harder at least to load stuff from other websites. But
I feel like cross-site scripting stuff is the most frequent security patch across the ecosystem. I don't know.
So, and then the security kit module has a few other things too. But yeah.
There's also a separate content security policy module, maybe it's just CSP, which is a little more convenient than using security kit.
Okay.
But that's one of many features that's built into security kit, of course.
I recommend third-party scanning too. Qualys is a free scan that I think is something. We get quarterly scans, and we've got to remediate all level 4, level 3, level 5s, and we get a lot of level 5s, but that's tedious, and that comes up on those things that will pop up that you don't really know about every quarter. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sometimes they're nasty, sometimes they're not. You can get a couple of free scans, I think, without paying. It's kind of like a high-level thing.
Okay.
And obviously there's pretty expensive packages to get a little bit more deeper into the information as well.
Yeah, I've worked on websites. Qualys is a good solution. I've not used that one myself, but I've worked on websites where we did have PCI compliance things. So the bank, or what the merchant basically said, you have to do these security scans through. I can't remember the names right now, even, but they would do some sort of security scan, and it was. Sometimes they came up with false positives, hey, you gotta prove them. But you gotta kind of have a little conversation with them a little bit. Say, hey, I can prove that I'm using a newer version of Drupal than that. They try to detect what they can and say, hey, this might be a security problem. And sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they have something that you need to look into. And so there's a lot of tools out there. And like I said, I don't remember all of them at once. I've heard of Qualys before for sure, but
Qualys the one that has the checkbox to keep yourself from being on the lead or loser board.
Yeah, I've used that. The SSL checker. Yeah, that's the.
They got that scan too, SSL checker.
Yeah, that one's a free scan for sure. But yeah, it kind of does a lot of information about checking your TLS, SSL, quality encryption systems and all that. So SSL Labs, I think is what they call that one or something. But,
yeah, that sounds good.
But,
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Is anybody else seeing, I talked to somebody in an AI discussion yesterday, and I've been seeing a rise in 400, 40x codes to a big site I'm monitoring. Are other people seeing that within the past month, maybe an upswing in those? I'm seeing that.
I mean, Pantheon must be seeing a lot. Those AI crawlers trying to index everything. They're
Yeah.
like less.
Yeah. And what was the time frame on that? I mean, I think they've been at it for a little while, but it seems like they're working harder. To me, within the past month, maybe ish.
I would say it's been out there for 6 months.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if your website has lots and lots of pages, it seems like there's some, browser, or I mean, bots of some sort that are trying to kind of index every page and make sure see if they're updated. And we've been seeing that a bit too.
One
Sometimes
thing
takes
is
websites.
like if you have search API based views with facets, the bots can get lost in trying all the possible combinations of filter criteria and
Yeah.
stuff.
You don't even need, I mean, I don't have that, but I've got some searchable data, large data sets. They're sortable, just a table.
So they will there's pages, like there's paginations,
Yeah.
there's like a lot of
Yeah.
They're less gentle than the Google bot, clearly. They're kind of aggressive. The only way so far that we've been using on all sides is slap in some Cloudflare kind of stuff and detect those patterns and throw them down. Like not necessarily block them completely or present a CAPTCHA or whatever, just so it's self-healing basically.
Yeah, from that, I think I was at the AI talk you were at, and
Yeah.
there was a mention that Cloudflare does offer like an AI endless maze to catch AI bots to basically use up all their browsing and send them off away from your site. And that was one of the things that was announced at my company that they might look into. And then I looked into, there was like a couple awesome lists on GitHub that have AI agents, like the names of them that you might be able to block using Apache, or ways to opt out, and like robots, but that's also, they're not malicious.
I mean, robots, while researching this, I did some Googling, and it appears robots.txt is a thing of the past.
It's the place that people look to see what you don't want you to look at.
Yeah.
It's a list of everything that's
Where fun is. Yeah.
Well, legitimate services like Google and Bing are supposed to. I mean, and they do ignore what's in the robots.txt file. Sometimes it could take them a little while to see the change if you make a change, but you can also kind of request that too. But I think the problem is, more of these bots that are just ignoring all that and just doing whatever they want, and that there wasn't a ton of that until sometime in the last year, I think.
Beyond security necessarily, but I also wonder if
Yeah.
canonically URLs on the pages that have lots of searches and filters were correct, because I feel like when they start seeing duplicates, I think that Google gives up. Like the good ones, they start to see that these are all the same pages and stops trying, maybe.
Sometimes,
but-
maybe.
I find the Google bot at page 523 I've got a page at the bottom and just keep going, and keep going, and keep going. And then they complain about it. I'm like, what the hell? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could in the robots.txt file say, hey, ignore the ones that have page numbers or something, and they would just not look at all of them. But
That's what I do.
yeah. So anyway, I guess anything else we want to talk about? Got a little off security, I feel like, at that last one, but that's okay. We got time. Yeah.
Just one little comment. I mean, you mentioned that old versions of Drupal will still use MD5.
Uh-huh.
Nobody should be using MD5.
Yeah.
It's crap
Yeah.
10 years ago. I mean, come on.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like-
It makes it readable, but it doesn't keep storing it in MD5, right? I feel like
You're
whenever
probably
it
right.
takes the
Yeah.
fresh password from the user once it gets a match and makes a fresh hash.
I think you're right on that. Yeah, it is at least. I did see at least in that code that I was showing, and I was looking in the core. There was definitely if it's stored in MD5, try to validate it this way. But I think you're right. There was something in there that said no, you need to sort of set a new one.
Potentially a
type of
quiet
thing.
way for someone to reset a password in the database. to
Yeah.
have access.
More recently, Drupal 10.1 changed the password hashing algorithm and introduced the PHP pass module for backwards compatibility. And I think one of your screenshots was from the PHP pass module.
Okay.
But there's a Q&A section on the documentation page for the PHP pass module, which talks about hashing and why you can't update them all at once, and
Okay.
when
Yeah.
things do get
Yeah.
updated.
You won't be able to update them all at once if you transfer it over because it doesn't know the password from a hash. So you need to verify user input, and then you have it for a moment.
So, right, so you can only
Right,
update
right.
the password hash when someone logs in because that's the only time you have password. So,
Cool. Yeah. I think most of I think those screenshots I showed were from some part of Drupal core. I don't think I downloaded any extra modules, but yeah, it's
right, PHP pass module is part
oh
of
yeah,
it.
okay, right. That makes sense.
OWASP has lots of really nice light reading if you want some bedtime material to read about all the security things.
Yeah. I was going to mention too, I do actually enjoy this Security Now podcast. It's just kind of general information about security from the This Week in Tech team. Steve Gibson is a guy who's been doing programming for like 50 years or something, I don't know. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I listened to this podcast for most of the last 20 years almost. And yeah, so yeah, it's like a couple hours every week now. But at the start, it was just, the first 50 or 100 episodes is all kind of basics of security and stuff. And now it's a lot more about like, here's the security news of the week, and here's some new research that people are doing or something. But yeah, it's definitely what's gotten me kind of interested in trying to be aware of security at least, and kind of help me put this
How
together.
about a Pantheon question? How many of your support requests are coming in concerning security? Is that a big component of day-to-day debugging, or is it more customer support? Like,
It's definitely more customer support.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely the occasional question about what like they found a CVE of some sort of a vulnerability, and they're like, is our systems susceptible to that? And sometimes we have to do some research to verify that or not. And we do get a lot of those questions about like, hey, how can I set a good content security policy header? Like, can you help us make that happen? And those types of things. And I think, but most of it is more kind of account questions or just general web development questions. It's
Well,
not
that's good to hear.
a ton of security, but yeah. Cool.
As far as the shield icon for modules that have opted into security coverage, the Drupal security team does not go looking for vulnerabilities in injured modules. They're not responsible for fixing vulnerabilities when they are found. The primary responsibility of the security team is to coordinate disclosure.
Okay. Yeah.
When security problems are reported and fixed.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Yeah.
It's like a statement of intention to try and be secure, and that we're actively working on it, right?
And that you'll cooperate with the security team if there is a response.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I definitely see some websites where they're like, "Oh yeah, we heavily rely on this module," and I'm like, it even just says in the name that it's an alpha module. Like, you might want to be careful, and you might expect some bugs, maybe. It's like, yeah, the shield kind of thing at least says like, hey, this, people will, the security team will try to make sure that if there is a security problem, that it will get communicated. But also, the developer says like, this is stable. This is kind of something that should be used, and that's maybe a better sign of like, ooh, this should be something I could use. So, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming. And
Thank you.
I guess we can leave for lunch.